Good afternoon, and welcome to today's Faster, Cheaper, Greener webcast series entitled Financing Perspectives on Using Public-Private Partnerships for Green Infrastructure, Wealth, and Community Resiliency. This webcast is sponsored by EPA Region 3's Water Protection Division and the Water Environment Federation, or WEF, and it's a part of our Faster, Cheaper, Greener webcast series. I'm Dominique Lukenhoff, Deputy Director of the Water Protection Division at EPA Region 3, and I will be moderating today's webcast. Thank you all for joining us today. First, a few tips for attending our webcast. Before we begin, we want to keep your webcast experience running smoothly. If you are hearing an echo, please close all browser windows except for the webcast presentation. If you're experiencing technical difficulties, you can type your issue into the white box at the bottom of your screen and click the Ask button. The responses from our tech team will appear below the white box. If you cannot see the white box at the bottom of your screen, change your screen resolution by clicking on Tools in your web browser and selecting Zoom Out. If you would like to see closed captioning, please make sure that you have turned off your pop-up block and click on the closed captioning button on the top of your screen. To complete the poll questions and survey, simply select the radio button to the left of your choice within the console window and click Submit. Please note the tabs at the top of your webcast console. On the Downloads tab, you can find some content including speaker contact information and additional information and links relevant to today's webcast. You can also see the Certificate tab. Everyone who participates in 60 minutes of the webcast is eligible to download the PDF copy of today's participation certificate. Today, we are very pleased to have financing experts from the White House and successful global and local lending institutions, along with our acting assistant administrator for the Office of Water at EPA, to share perspectives on using P3s and alternative financing for faster, cheaper, greener stormwater management and community sustainability. These national champions and practitioners will provide an overview of options, benefits, and how-tos, and we won't forget the challenges, for financing affordable stormwater management through the use of innovative P3 approaches that achieve greener infrastructure, community revitalization, economic development, equitable job growth, and enhanced local quality of life. I'd like to now introduce our speakers. We're very pleased to have Nancy Stoner, our Acting Assistant Administrator for Water at USEPA. Ms. Stoner's extensive career in environmental policy and law began in 1987 as a trial attorney in the Environment and Natural Resources Division of the U.S. Department of Justice. Following her time at Justice, she served as Director of the Office of Policy Analysis and Office of Enforcement and Compliance Assurance at US EPA, where she contributed to development of EPA's environmental auditing and self-disclosure policies. Most recently, Ms. Stoner served as Co-Director of Natural Resources Defense Council's water program and spearheaded NRDC's work to clean up the Anacostia River in Washington, D.C., including facilitating the use of green infrastructure and low-impact development measures that reduce stormwater flows and sewer overflows into the Anacostia. David Wilkinson is the White House Senior Policy Advisor for Social Finance and Innovation. Working closely with the White House Office of Social Innovation and the White House Council on Environmental Quality, he develops policies enabling capital markets to better support sustainability and innovation, advancing social finance and environmental resiliency. In this role, Mr. Wilkinson draws from an extensive background in community finance, capital markets, and financial innovation, and is primarily responsible for advancing White House priorities relating to social impact bonds, innovation bonds, and green infrastructure policy and finance. His work also supports the White House's innovation agenda, including advancing impact investing, evidence-based policy, nonprofit access to capital, and cross-sector partnerships. In the area of green infrastructure finance, Mr. Wilkinson works to expand public and private finance for low-impact water and energy infrastructure. And backed by popular demand to our series of webcasts is Anthony Tony Friedman, partner Holland & Knight. Tony joined Holland & Knight as a partner in 2006. He has practiced law in Washington, D.C. for more than 30 years and previously served as Deputy Director of Legislation at EPA from 1977 to 1978 and as Deputy Assistant Secretary for Housing Policy and Budget at HUD from 1978 to 1981. Mr. Friedman's practice consists primarily of transactional, financial, policy, and regulatory matters involving housing. He assisted the Department of Defense in the development and implementation of its successful military housing privatization initiative and HUD in carrying out its mixed finance and capital fund financing initiatives for the public housing program, two prominent success stories in the P3 field. John Germain, Director Barclays Capital. John is also backed by very popular demand, joined Barclays Municipal Finance Group in 2008. Prior to Barclays' acquisition of Lehman Brothers, Mr. Germain was a senior VP of Lehman's Public Finance Group beginning in 1998. He specializes in infrastructure, public-private partnerships, and mortgages. He is an expert in capital markets and in structuring and financing complex, taxable, and tax-exempt projects. During his tenure at Lehman and Barclays, he has financed over $5.5 billion in mortgage and infrastructure programs. Prior to Lehman Brothers, he was responsible for running the State of New York Mortgage Insurance Fund. Mr. Germain started his career with Bank of New York Mortgage, where he was responsible for originating conventional multifamily mortgages nationwide. Jason Washington is a Senior Vice President of Community Wealth Building Initiative with City First Enterprises. He is a lawyer with extensive experience managing projects and building relationships. Jason joined City First Enterprises from the White House Fellowship Program, through which he worked at the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, supporting the Hurricane Sandy Rebuilding Task Force. He also served as Senior Policy Advisor to Baltimore Mayor Stephanie Rawlings Blake and as Chair of the Mayor's School Construction Task Force. He has also worked as an attorney, and he holds a BA from Morehouse College. I'm sorry, I missed everybody else's credentials and moved into yours, Jason, and obtained his JD from New York University. You'll be able to get all of this information online. So I'm going to also express that unfortunately Matthew Malaya with WEF was going to join us for closing comments. He had an urgent matter, but we're very pleased to have Claudio Terniden as stepping in for him. Claudio is Director of Regulatory Affairs for the Water Environment Federation, where he supports WEF's regulatory and legislative efforts. He worked with the Water Environment Research Foundation, that's WERF, on nutrients, energy, and biosolids research. Claudio started his career as pre-treatment director for the city of Elkhart, Indiana, worked with the state of Indiana on the Great Lakes Initiative water quality standards. He's also worked with cities in Indiana, helping them address wet weather issues and how to fund them. And so, with that, again, I'd like to thank all of our speakers for giving us their time and sharing a lot of great information today. I'd like to start the webcast with a little bit of background. For those who have already joined us, you've seen some of this, but for those who have already joined us, I've changed it up for you guys a bit. And I'm going to provide a description of a boilerplate community-based public-private partnership that we in Region 3 have been working with many experts around the country in terms of synthesizing an approach for green stormwater management and community benefits. So here is our goal. It's to highlight partnership framework options with the private sector that support a green industry willing and able to assist local governments and their communities. This is in the spirit of collaboration, public welfare and trust to finance, construct, and maintain. O&M is a very big part of this, and you'll hear from our speakers today how this contributes to green jobs. I'm not going to go into this slide as much because we're going to hear a little bit more about stormwater as a growing source of water quality impacts around the country and what the current cost of addressing stormwater amounts to, along with other water infrastructure needs. But with the problem comes opportunities for solutions, and therein new economic engines that we can grow and boost the economy in this country. Insufficient results from traditional approaches, we need a new paradigm. Growing local mandates, again, the impact to our local jurisdictions, we need to get them help. And communities are actually turning to green infrastructure practices over a number of traditional gray practices to treat and prevent runoff pollution, but also assist with flood management, water demand, urban heat island impacts, and other benefits, including the creation of green jobs. We also know that there's good news. There's no shortage of money. We're seeing, and in fact we've heard on previous webcasts from Philadelphia, from Prince George's County, New York City, D.C., hundreds of other municipalities around the U.S. are pursuing GI and ultimately creating markets around this pursuit. Investment banks, financiers, you'll hear that today, see innovation in stormwater as a very important emerging market in this country. Stormwater credit and contract trading markets are also being established. We also know historically from traditional public-private partnerships that these approaches can reduce costs to local government anywhere from 20 to 50% and more. Had to throw this one in there. Is this a P3? And I've actually got to credit Alex Dunn, who recently shared this particular slide as a type of partnership. You can decide who plays which role. Designed the right way, this type of partnership with the private sector can do the following: create economic feasibility, better leverage local government funds and resources, foster development of new LID, GI technologies, expedite project delivery, spur local economic development, show transparency in community engagement, including equitable community engagement, drive down costs using economies of scale and market forces through private sector ingenuity and efficiencies, and accelerate sustained regulatory compliance with water quantity and quality standards. This is the challenge. We shared actually our first webcast, which was based on our finding of a very successful, what we are calling a community-based P3, and it's the U.S. Army's Residential Communities Initiative. The speakers there actually presented some statistics that are based on 10 years of successful operation. It was out of a need from the Army, but now DOD is using this approach of not having the necessary infrastructure for soldiers and their families, and certainly not having enough money to meet the need in a timely manner. As a result of this unique approach, 98% of Army housing is managed by private partners. Maintenance backlog eliminated 20 times faster than if done by traditional procurement methods. Soldiers and families are highly satisfied. Partners raised $10 billion in private capital, leveraging public funds approximately 11 to 1, and so forth. And you may ask, well, how does this relate to today's topic, focus on green infrastructure? we saw that green infrastructure, as opposed to the traditional gray approach, really means that, using hundreds, if not thousands, of decentralized practices in a holistic system. It means that we have to look at our current procurement systems, which historically have been designed for centralized approaches, not for decentralized approaches. And how do we best address that and get that economy of scale and drive the demand for better performing technologies, high performance, low impact, faster, better, greener results? We saw this model is very applicable to the challenge that we're looking at with regards to green infrastructure. If you can see this slide, this was our mock-up of what we're calling a community-based P3, which we want to differentiate from traditional privatization. That, in fact, the local government is still a very pivotal partner, and you'll hear, though, how risks are reallocated, transferred, shared, and how the municipal and private partner can work together to create a partnership that ultimately helps to grow local jobs, local wealth, and accelerate environmental restoration. In terms of local quality of life, community benefits through community stewardship and economic development of small and disadvantaged businesses. There's greater access for these small businesses, and there's also greater access, particularly through O&M, for disadvantaged communities and the labor that is available there. And I won't go into, again, a lot of detail here because you're going to hear more about this from our speakers, but if you look at the diversity of jobs that this approach brings, from engineers to plumbers to landscape architects, urban planners, construction workers, contractors, landscapers, auditors, truck drivers, you'll hear why areas like Prince George's County is projecting in the thousands of jobs that are going to be created as a result of taking this approach. So I'd like to sort of end with these critical themes in what we call a community-based public-private partnership, which we believe, in fact, can be very adaptable, very versatile. But what is important in establishing it is that there is a clear alignment of goals. There's ultimately a focus on sustainability, efficient use of funds. Leveraging is very, very key here. That it is value-driven with commitment, transparency, accountability, right down through O&M, and there is surety of execution and funding, which is what attracts the private dollars. You heard on the last webcast that the permits, in fact, and the requirements are actually attracting some of the private dollars because of the requirement and the surety therein. There's a transfer of risk, and certainly there are local benefits. So with that, I would like to start our panel and would like to introduce, with my pleasure, our Acting Assistant Administrator, Nancy Stoner, for introduction to the webcast. Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much, Dominique. Dominique is really in the leadership of the thinking on these issues nationally, not just in Region 3. So it's no surprise to me that she put together this great panel and this great webcast today on this very important topic. So I'd first like to acknowledge and thank our guest speakers for sharing their expertise and our enthusiasm for this effort to assist our communities throughout the country in addressing the increasing demands for ensuring clean water and a sustainable future for us all. As you may know, current estimates for dollars needed to address rising water, wastewater, and stormwater infrastructure are well over $600 billion. And these needs dwarf the availability of traditional federal funding, which hasn't been able to keep pace with growing needs, and at this point can best only address about 15% of the problem. And public dollars, of course, are also increasingly challenged in trying to meet their 85% of the costs. And this is a big issue for local communities that we hear about often with respect to water, wastewater, and stormwater investments. The potential race to the bottom that this drives begs for a major paradigm shift in the way we finance, treat, and maintain our water resources, and in particular that of stormwater, which is one of the fastest growing impacts to our nation's waters and also presents one of the largest funding challenges. Stormwater retrofits are often expensive and difficult to fund. However, they play a key role in water quality improvement and in finding solutions that are more sustainable and more cost-effective in order to advance both community and environmental priorities, such as that of the Chesapeake Bay restoration effort here in Region 3. In this time of growing water shortages and rising treatment costs, it's also time to approach rain as a resource, not as a waste. And many communities around the country are starting to do that by adopting and integrating green infrastructure practices as more affordable and sustainable ways of treating and protecting their water resources. Greening is happening, and it's not a zero-sum game. An economy-based approach on greening efforts can restore watersheds and along the way create new opportunities for improving the economy and adding new jobs. To solve the challenge of accelerated restoration, such as that of the Chesapeake Bay watershed, new mechanisms for permitting, financing, capacity building, and fostering new partnerships are being pursued and have been the impetus for sharing and exchanging ideas through this webcast series and other networks across the country. Along these lines, we believe public-private partnerships, or P3s, offer much potential for providing innovative, alternative financing solutions to better assist our communities with achieving greener, infrastructure-driven stormwater management. P3s have been successfully used in other public infrastructure sectors, such as transportation, energy, waste disposal, and even wastewater treatment. These P3s have been found to reduce costs as much as 50%. Moreover, P3s like that being developed and demonstrated by Prince George's County, Maryland, will help us to launch an important paradigm shift, shifting the view of stormwater management from just that of a requirement to that of an opportunity to support community revitalization, job creation, and concerns for flooding, resiliency, and drought that many communities across the country are facing. So now's the time to pursue these community and green infrastructure-driven partnership models with the right private partners to innovate and deliver the needed 21st century stormwater management infrastructure, which also helps to stimulate local economic activity, job creation, and community revitalization. Private participation in addressing public infrastructure needs such as this opens untapped capacity and provides great opportunities to create new green industries for managing rain as a resource while creating green infrastructure as a lasting asset that provides multiple benefits. As you'll hear from our featured speakers today, P3s can not only drive local economic development, but they can also create equitable marketplaces where small, minority, and disadvantaged businesses can grow and thrive. They can produce economic value through private sector participation, injecting business ingenuity, energy, efficiencies, and capital into infrastructure, and applying a funding multiplier to leverage local government investment. P3s have the potential to support creation of green infrastructure industries that drive innovation, standardization, lower costs, and spur local economic development. Finally, we hope to see these approaches as our collective ability to solve what are now complex, costly public problems through the creation of faster, affordable, and greener outcomes and assets compared to that of conventional programs and methods. It is with this note that I take pleasure in introducing the next speaker, David Wilkinson, who is Senior Policy Advisor, Social Finance and Innovation from the Executive Office of the President.
Thank you so much, Nancy and Dominique, for your introductory comments, and thank you, Dominique, for your on-the-ground leadership, and Nancy for your policy leadership as advocates for green stormwater infrastructure across the country. We're here today to talk about the advantages of public-private partnerships in achieving these goals. And I'm keenly aware that I am speaking to the folks that are on the ground. who are have the ability and the talent and deal with the challenges every day in managing stormwater. And the folks on this call know a lot more about that than me. I do have a background in finance and work with CEQ leading much of the green finance efforts there. And I will say that the public-private partnership model is one of the most exciting things that we are seeing. And I think that is for a variety of reasons. The Green Stormwater Public-Private Partnership addresses a series of presidential priorities. That includes environmental sustainability. As many of you, I'm sure, know, the President announced several months ago his climate action plan to address resilience and environmental sustainability in the long term, and that is a real legacy item for the President and a real priority for this administration, as I'm sure Nancy is seeing from her standpoint at the EPA, as well as others all around the federal government, the high level of activity around the Climate Action Plan. But beyond environmental sustainability, which is incredibly important in its own right, green stormwater infrastructure is very important for other priorities, presidential priorities, including infrastructure resilience, especially in the face of a changing climate, as well as job creation and ladders to economic opportunity. And so this is we think, a unique opportunity, and we are aware that it's the folks that are on this call really have the ability to advance solutions like this, which could be game changers for strengthening the country, both economically, environmentally, and in terms of our national resilience. So why are we enthusiastic about green infrastructure, green stormwater infrastructure? Well, I think the folks on this call know better than I do that it helps municipalities avoid the health and environmental challenges of runoff, and that it assists communities in achieving stormwater mitigation plans and avoiding costly penalties. And all of the sort of core water priorities are absolutely priorities for us, but there are a series of others, some of which have been referred to already on the call. One is the ability of green stormwater infrastructure programs, when operated at scale, to drive community economic development, in particular by creating low barrier to entry jobs that are sustainable and long-term. Green stormwater infrastructure also saves local resources by keeping stormwater out of combined sewer systems. It reduces wear and tear on gray infrastructure. It also reduces the need to install more gray infrastructure, and it reduces wear and tear on wastewater treatment facilities, thereby saving resources. It also makes transportation safer. Permeable pavement is shown to limit upsplash, which makes driving during rainy conditions more dangerous. Permeable pavement can literally save lives, and there's evidence to show it. And it can also enhance community resilience by mitigating the first inch or two of street-level flooding. We were talking about the President's Climate Action Plan. There are important climate benefits as well. Transporting, cleaning, processing water, water services broadly are one of the single largest causes of energy use in the United States. It's responsible for about 3 to 4% of total energy use, and 30 to 40% of each municipality's electricity expense, 30 to 40%, goes to cleaning and processing water. So by diverting stormwater from municipal water systems, we save local governments' resources by lowering their electricity bills, and we also reduce greenhouse gas emissions that result from energy use. Lastly, there is substantial evidence that green stormwater installations enhance community appearance in ways that contribute to economic activity, which is absolutely a priority for the President. So we know, and Nancy and Dominique talked about sort of the need and the market gaps. We know that the stormwater infrastructure need is great, and the need is a relatively near-term need. If we are going to drive a green response rather than a traditional gray response, we need to think of creative ways of getting it to scale, understanding that traditionally used resources for stormwater infrastructure err towards gray, and that traditionally used, to the extent there are any, to the extent there are some, traditionally used resources for green infrastructure are not at the scale we need. So there's a few key challenges as we see it from the federal and the White House level for getting green stormwater infrastructure to scale on the timeline needed to respond to the nation's immediate needs. One is that we need accelerated delivery. The fine-grained nature of green stormwater installations typically discourage at-scale implementation if we use the normal design, build approach. Another barrier is that municipalities often, if we are going to fund at a more significant scale, municipalities often have debt ceilings that can prevent them from accelerating upfront capitals to large-scale implementation. So there's both a capital and a contracting kind of barriers that could slow needed accelerated delivery. Another barrier is that there's perceived risk. Implementing green stormwater infrastructure at scale the way that the public-private partnership in Prince George's County is envisioned to do, doing that independently as a municipality, doing that at scale, there are a series of risks in terms of costs, schedules, logistical, and performance risk. We also know that currently, because there are limited resources and sort of a limited field of city engineers with knowledge and expertise in civil engineers with knowledge and expertise in green infrastructure, folks will, city water departments and municipalities will often go with what they know. And one thing that we hear, at least at the White House level, is that for those who are putting their credentials on the line, the civil engineers and water departments, many would like to see a better substantiated evidence base for green stormwater infrastructure. And lastly, from a financial perspective, private capital is going to be disinclined to finance large-scale, long-term projects unless there is certainty of follow-through. And 20 and 30-plus year initiatives, which are required to get this to scale from a financing perspective, introduce significant political risk. Simply because as administrations change, administrative priorities change across municipalities. And lastly, it can be the sort of last barrier that we see is that it can be complicated and expensive. Internally, it requires development of new skill set within local government and management of a whole new series of assets. I understand that Prince George's was when they were looking at an internal option, we're looking at just an internal management staff of 20, so an entirely new division of government. Externally, the government bidding processes can drive up costs. And because contracts look for short-term savings in order to lower their bids, in order to win the bid, and because they're not typically accountable for how well an installation works in the long term, there are challenges to the sort of traditional design bid build approach. And it's also the case that large-scale stormwater infrastructure will work better if it's an integrated system, and a series of smaller bids, even if aggregated to some scale, may not be integrated to the extent needed. So as we see it, looking at these policy barriers across the country and financial barriers across the country, the public-private partnership model that Prince George's and others are pursuing, but really Prince George's being sort of the lead nationally, we see this as addressing those challenges. I think first it's important to make a clarifying point that public-private partnerships are not the same as privatization, and there have been complaints about and concerns about privatization and a lack of accountability. But through a public-private partnership, a municipality retains, unlike privatization, a municipality retains long-term ownership of land and the stormwater assets. The municipality also retains control over rate setting if there's associated stormwater fees. The contract can have flexibility to address changing needs. And if the partner fails to comply with performance levels or other regulatory demands, they can be fired. So it's an approach to really hold the private partner accountable, and can be thought of, while it's called a public-private partnership, can be thought of as a sort of a large-scale service contract. So we think that the P3 model, done well, can address all of those concerns that I just mentioned in pretty compelling ways. One, sort of the need for accelerated and at-scale delivery. If we look at the situation in Prince George's County, we know that they're installing approximately 50,000 green stormwater infrastructure installations. The majority of those in the next 4 years, over 8,000 acres. They have a total cost of $1.2 billion. And that's difficult to do with a series of one-off bidded contracts or with traditionally available resources. And so to do that up front, they need significant upfront capital. So the P3 model is significant in that it has enabled Prince George's County to leverage private financing in a very significant way. And they're able to do that because there was, in particular in Prince George's, because there's a reliable stream of income as a result of the stormwater fee. Now, that's not a necessary component as we see it, but it is valuable. Municipalities that are unable to take that approach, and there's certainly barriers to that approach, which we can talk about, but any municipality that generates tax revenue and can dedicate some portion of it to programs like this can use bonding authority to accelerate funding in the same way. The unique advantage to the stormwater-linked revenue bond approach, there's unique value to that because it does not add to the municipal debt cap. And that sort of off-balance financing means less intertwined competing uses for traditional municipal general obligation bonding authority. So it's a great way to have significant upfront capital. And from a private finance perspective, and I'm sure John Germain will talk more about this, it provides a sustainable, reliable 30-year contract that gives predictability for the private financing partner as well as for local contractors, which is very meaningful. The second concern we talked about was risk. And so a key benefit of public-private partnership transactions is the opportunity for municipalities to transfer financial and performance risks that are inherent in the design and the construction and the operation of water facilities, to transfer those to private entities with which they contract to provide these services. and essentially put the program responsibilities on the shoulders of the private sector and reduce some of the risks that we talked about before that might typically discourage municipalities from taking on at-scale green infrastructure solutions in sort of a new and innovative space. The third area was sort of that it's complicated and expensive. But one of the advantages of bundling and placing with one private partnership is that municipalities through this structure can drive cost savings in procurement and permitting, design, construction, and maintenance, both because it's bundled and because some of the typical challenges, barriers, and delays to municipal contracting on a more fine-grained basis are avoided. It's also the case that it can be done faster. In contrast, the design bid build approach separates the design and the build and the operation phases of the project. So under the DBB model, independent design and construction firms generally have no operating responsibilities beyond project startup and therefore are less aligned with the municipality regarding the long-term operating performance of the facilities. It also has advantages by avoiding change orders and cost overruns and or litigation costs associated with separate and non-integrated service providers. And the cost savings can be significant. I know only from having gotten to listen to the last call that Prince George's County is anticipating early on 40% cost savings in stormwater management costs just through streamlining the planning, design, construction, and operation costs through the public-private partnership. And they believe that it could be as high as 50 to 60% over the life of the program. And that is including, and this is significant because one response that we'll get sometimes in discussing public-private partnerships is the financing costs. But these are savings that more than make up for the financing costs associated with the project. And I think it's important to reiterate that this enables enables municipalities and water authorities to hold a public-private partner accountable for results, not just in the context of water, but in the context of the other metrics that I mentioned before, and particularly economic development. So, for instance, we know that the Prince George's partnership is not simply holding the private partner accountable for performance, for successful installation and performance of its green stormwater infrastructure installations, but they're also being held accountable for local job creation. And I think sort of as this is an important point to make because many of the people on this call are doing incredibly important work in the field of water. But to make the case, and certainly I understand that to make the case in Prince George's, it is not enough to approach a county council or city council and mayor and discuss the importance of aquatic animal habitat and nitrogen levels. It's not something that drives at-scale political action as much as it perhaps should. Economic development is something that does, and this is absolutely at base an economic development spend that happens to have significant environmental advantages. Holding the private partner accountable for that job creation impact, particularly in low-income communities and areas with the highest levels of unemployment, is a tremendous way to make the case as you around the country are thinking about how to do this. There's little that drives political bodies that have the ability to make these decisions more than the job creation argument and the economic development argument. And so I will leave you with that thought and am incredibly grateful on behalf of the White House for all of the important and terrific work you're doing in response to our nation's environmental and economic challenges.
That was great. Nancy and Dave, those were great ways to certainly start this discussion and provide a lot of food for thought. And Dave, I think you're ready to teach the course. In fact, there was a lot of information. We have some questions coming in, and I'll just sort of leave it open. I'm not sure how much time Nancy has if she's still around, but kind of, one question is about incentives. Could you comment on the need for incentives or what types of incentives that might be provided or supported at the national level to sort of catalyze these, since it's a significant change in the way we've been doing business?
Yeah, so I am here, Dominique, and it would be good to hear from people about this. I mean, obviously, the kind of information that we've been talking about so far and are in the presentations talk about the financial incentives, the job creation incentives, sort of the natural incentives associated with this. But if there are any kinds of barriers or other kinds of reasons why communities would be discouraged from doing this that could be potentially addressed through an incentive, that would be something that would be of interest for us to hear about here at EPA, and I'm sure the states would be interested in that information as well.
I guess I would only add one thing in terms of specific federal financial incentives, in terms of one that folks on this call may not already be aware of. The President announced $600 million in Tiger transportation infrastructure grants that are available now. I think there are about, he announced it 3 weeks ago. There are about 6 weeks left in the open response period, in the NOFA period. But that Tiger grant, and I encourage you to look at it at dot.gov/Tiger, you can see the NOFA. And you will see, when you look at the NOFA, two important things. One is that there is an extraordinary amount of language about transportation complementary green infrastructure within the scored environmental section of the NOFA. So GI for groundwater recharge and all other forms of green stormwater infrastructure are a priority item within this $600 million fund. You'll also note in the financing section, the program specifically refers to the public-private financing model, and in the context of that, pay for success or pay for performance approaches, which is being pursued in Prince George's County. 15% of those funds are available for planning. The other 85% of the funds are for sort of shovel-ready or close to shovel-ready projects. But I would encourage folks on this call to look at that and to link with your transportation divisions to explore possible integrated green stormwater transportation opportunities.
Well, I can surely second that. In fact, that was wonderful news, and we at EPA have started to get the word out to a number of our states and our communities. And Dave, here's a question for you. The question, actually, it was a request that you revisit the benefits linking revenue bonds to stormwater management projects.
Oh, okay. Well, sure. So in particular, revenue bonds are valuable because they attach municipal bonding authority to a specific revenue stream. In the case of Prince George's County, that stream is associated with a stormwater fee, which is a reliable, predictable flow of funding. And so that is meaningful because it enables financing to, enables private financial partners to see low risk stream of funding, making and enabling the municipality to access lower cost financing. That is different than general obligation bonds, which many municipalities have caps on the total municipal debt they can take on, general debt. So the off-balance sheet financing means that there is as much capacity to finance that as the market will allow, and it doesn't bump up against other municipal priorities, and there's a lot of competing uses for municipal bonding authority.
Great. And Nancy, can you speak to how EPA is visiting the state of our SRF, our funding in light of this approach, perhaps with regards to leveraging? Dave,
well,
I'm sorry. I'll leave that open, but I'm sorry, Nancy, go ahead.
Well, feel free to add anything that you want to add to what I have to say, Dominique, which is, I think we are seeing a lot of pressure on the SRF in terms of, the overall federal budget and difficult decisions that we need to make. And we have seen that reflected in the President's FY15 budget, which is now out. And so I think that there will be a long-term a reduction in that SRF over time, and so we do need to look toward other vehicles for financing the water, wastewater, and stormwater infrastructure that is really essential for our economy to run. And so I'm grateful to Region 3 and to Dominique and to the White House as well for their leadership in trying to figure out what are the ways that we can do this, because we really don't want to cut back on the services that people rely on, the safe drinking water that they need, the clean waters that they use for so many purposes. And so trying to figure out other financing mechanisms that will work for local communities is a real priority for the Obama administration as well as the EPA, and so we're delighted to be helping to do that.
Great, and I know from previous webcasts that there are many folks out there who are trying to champion alternative approaches. One important aspect of this sort of change in movement is the consideration of training. It was highlighted, about the need to be able to design and maintain, and these are sort of different approaches. Dave, you mentioned, Prince George's County putting in, I think it was 50,000 or so of these structures. Can you both comment perhaps on capacity building and training? One question was, would there be consideration to employ some institution like a community college to teach skill sets? Because there's a large gradient, wide gradient of skill sets.
Yeah, so this is Nancy. If I could comment first, and then unfortunately I'm going to need to leave the webcast to go to another meeting. But I just wanted to say that I actually saw that underway in Cincinnati on a trip that I visited out there, and the community college there was using its own campus as a laboratory for green infrastructure training for the students there. They were also working with the EPA. We have a research and development facility there and a lab there and so forth, so that we were getting really good information on performance, on cost, on maintenance issues, and that was being used by the faculty at the community college to teach the students there so that they could be effective practitioners on green infrastructure in their own communities. So I think that was a great model, and I'd be happy to get that information to Dominique to share with the webcast.
Oh, great. We can do that.
Great, and I guess I would just add that we know that in Prince George's County, a big part of the focus, in addition to local businesses generally, is to focus on specifically hiring in low-income communities with the highest levels of unemployment, it could be a population, many of whom require training and wraparound support services in order to facilitate their initial employment in this field. And I know that Jason Washington is on the call, and so I'll just note that I think it will be great if Jason speaks to his planning as a nonprofit partner of Prince George's to make sure that those folks who are most in need of employment have the training they need to get the job done.
Great, and the questions are streaming in. I think folks are starting to think about this. So, I want to get to our other speakers. Speaking of Jason, John and Tony, who have some great information. So I again want to thank Nancy and Dave for really helping to kick this off and get everybody thinking. And we will be sharing the questions and answers later on, and we'll come back to some of these questions. Nancy, we know you have to go, but we'll come back to questions, and we'll also follow up after the webcast, make sure everybody's got answers from EPA. So thanks again. Before we move to the next speaker, we want to do some quick poll questions for the audience and find out who's present today. So if you can, and I'm actually going to ask Amber to help me move out those poll questions, but if you see this radio button, click on the radio button. This is the first question. I work for local government, state government, federal government, nonprofit, green infrastructure industry, academia, other. So if you would respond, we're going to share who is primarily on this call. And Dave, you hit it right. 80% of today's participants are from local government. Let's see.
Wow.
Wait. Yeah. Actually, we got some more numbers in. I spoke too soon. We have a finer gradient here. We've got now 11% from state government, so these numbers are changing a bit. 13% federal government. I'll send a shout out to all my EPA friends and colleagues out there that are leading the charge, hopefully joining us today. And green infrastructure industry, 13%. We've got that elusive other that says 29%. Let's see. Next question. How many people are participating in the webcast today at your location? If you could please respond to that for us. Click the radio button that best describes how many people are watching the webcast from your location. Just me, 2 to 5, 6 to 10, more than 10. So if you can do that for us, we would appreciate it. And the numbers are, it looks like primarily the just me's, although I hate to say just me, let's just say me, 92%, 2 to 5, 8%, etc. So with that, we'd like to move on to our next speaker, and that is John Germain, who is Director of Barclays Capital. And we want to thank John for joining us again. John was very involved with the military housing approach, 10 years of data there. We had folks calling in to meet with John all over the country. I'm sure John didn't quite expect that from a webcast. So our compromise, John, was to bring you back. So thanks for being here today, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dominique. I appreciate it. Thank you for welcoming me back and for hosting the forum. The presentations have been excellent and demonstrate a depth of appreciation and insight that is not only remarkable but necessary to make the program successful. So thank you. I have a couple slides. I'm going to be brief, but very supportive of everything that everyone has said. My name is John Germain. I work at Barclays in the Municipal Finance Department, where we finance government and municipal programs across the United States. And I'm very interested in working on this program to finance stormwater management, which, as we've all said, will improve infrastructure, create jobs, and improve the water quality of our waterways. It's truly a fascinating program and potentially very dynamic. But our point today is that it can, as David alluded, in many ways, in many very professional ways, can be easily financed. And on our next slide, I've got the points that we want to cover, which are basically three. And the effort here is to try to keep things simple because we don't want to make this too complicated, and it's fairly straightforward. And I think we were lucky on the first go-around to be involved with the Prince George's County transaction, and I'll explain why in just a moment. But the stormwater management program is well suited for raising debt in the bond markets, as has already been stated. That's point number one. Point number two is that stormwater P3s, carefully structured, will attract investors in the capital markets. So we'll go through why that might be the case. And then, of course, the next point, we've learned from our previous experience that the focus should be on creating the partnership and not letting the financing drive the partnership, because this is a long-term partnership and we'll be accessing the capital markets potentially in many different ways throughout that relationship, that long-term relationship. So it's important to build a partnership that works, and financing can be reactive to that partnership, and I think that that's an important point. So we'll talk about that a little bit as well. So on to the first point, stormwater management retrofit programs are well suited for raising debt in the bond markets. And right back to Prince George County is an example of why I said we got lucky. Before Prince George's County issued an RFP, I believe, this was the order and sequence of events, they adopted what's known as CB 45-2013, which is the legislative authority for a stormwater utility fee in Prince George's County. I have said in other presentations, it's beautiful legislation, and here we are starting a financial forum in this webcast talking about legislation, but it's really the backbone of why Prince George's County got off to a tremendous start in laying the groundwork for this first program. And I do understand that some municipalities and jurisdictions may not be able to use it, but as a model for a fee structure, I think that the transaction we're working on is going to be a good template for others who can create the same sort of stormwater utility fee. And the reason it is so effective is that it contains the fundamental and prerequisite collateral for securitization in the capital markets. The rating agencies have pre-established criteria for obtaining investment-grade ratings to finance special fees in the capital markets. And we some of those who are on this call, including Tony Friedman, meaning we, and myself, have worked on plenty of public-private partnership endeavors that have no rating agency criteria. We had to create them to go to the capital markets, and we had to, in a certain respect, speculate over how we were going to finance some of the public-private partnerships that we've worked on. We've successfully financed them, but here we have a situation where the capital markets know what special fees are, and they have special terms and conditions that can be adopted for stormwater management to create access to the capital markets, in which the appetite is strong, which is the last point. And it's a perfect segue into the next slide, which is the second point, that the stormwater P3s exhibit attractive attributes to investors. And the reason is these stormwater fees can be leveraged, and they can be leveraged in the form of a revenue bond, as David eloquently explained, which provides municipal bonding authority that's linked to a revenue stream. But the stormwater P3, if accurately structured or correctly structured, can obtain long-term fixed-rate financing, and that's extremely important. And when we say long-term, we mean 30, 35-year, and potentially even 40-year financing, depending on the structure of the partnership. There's no general obligation pledge required under that structure. It can be on or off balance sheet, depending on whether one opts to offer a general obligation, which is certainly not necessary. And you can also obtain non-recourse financing and surety of financing execution. And as was said earlier, the special fee is essentially legislatively authorized, which provides the perfect capitalization tool for us to finance in the capital markets. So without being too repetitive, that fee is really a very instrumental tool for bringing stormwater management into the capital markets and building successful programs. One of the most important tools. The last slide is sort of focuses on some of the lessons that we've learned in approaching this program, and it can't be underemphasized that no stormwater management fee program is going to be successful if the partnership isn't constructed properly with alignment of interests. It's a long-term program. It's not just an upfront construction program. It requires management, and it requires rehabilitation, or whatever long-term management objectives are required from the jurisdiction are going to require long-term financing. So what we have learned, and what I said in the beginning of the presentation was, don't let financing drive the partnership. Let the partnership as a first step when you're creating a stormwater management program. The first step should be to build a partnership where interests are aligned. You create a strong P3. You're synchronizing stormwater goals, EPA mandates, local jurisdictions such as Prince George's County objectives that are additive to stormwater management, such as job growth and employment objectives, and creating an economic growth engine from stormwater. All of those elements need to be ironed out in the partnership, including aligning interests, like we said, where a developer who is brought into this program has the incentives to perform on not just the upfront construction, but the overall maintenance of those programs that have been put in place, that great infrastructure. And as David said, if they don't perform, and this is how these partnerships that we've worked on have been so successful, if they don't perform, they have the threat of removal, or they have the threat of non-payment for providing services. So the county or the jurisdiction that is taxing or providing this infrastructure is able to have control, like David said, and we see that as instrumental in not only building a strong partnership, but also in working in collaboration with the county to minimize construction and maintenance costs, which is the second step. After a strong partnership framework is adopted, the second step should be on minimizing those costs, and David alluded to some of the cost savings that are on the table for the transaction we're working on, which are significant. And I couldn't agree more that there is no way that financing can make up for a cost savings of the magnitude that David was referring to for and under a public-private partnership, which is exactly why you have to put the first two steps first. And once all of those elements are agreed upon, then we can build a custom financing program which meets the cash demands of the partnership activities. And that's what we do. We've done it on many public-private partnership endeavors, and Tony's the expert in how to create, some of those examples. I'll certainly leave it to Tony to cover those. But, we are very supportive of this program. Our message is that it is financeable, and it's financeable not only just with stormwater management fees, it's also financeable in other ways, but using the first template that we have at our luxury, which is the Prince George's County example. We think we're going to have a wonderful program in fairly short order. So, as I said, I was going to be brief, but they're important points, and I wanted to make sure that they didn't get lost within the context of everyone else's presentation. So that's all I've got, unless there are other questions.
There are questions streaming in for you, John. You won't get away that easily. And that was great, by the way. Thank you. I'm going to maybe pose a couple, and in the interest of time, move on to Tony and Jason. Maybe we'll stop after Tony. But let me ask this question. There was the request actually to include how this could be done without a stormwater fee. Realizing the stormwater fee is clearly a big driver, and the local legislation that Prince George's County put into place, again, made it easier to actually be able to bring in this private financing. But could you talk about how it could be done without a stormwater fee?
Absolutely, and I'm sure there are others that can contribute to the answer to that question as well. But I think if you paint two broad spectrums, and they in of themselves may be self-limiting, so it's a fairly open question without really understanding the dynamics of the financial wherewithal and capacity of the person or entity that might be interested in the answer. But the two broad spectrums, I think, are where an issuer, which means a jurisdiction that needs to meet EPA mandates and wants to address stormwater management protocols, can either use the balance sheet of the municipality for general obligation debt to finance the stormwater activity. It's not one that needs to be adopted in Prince George's County because they have a special fee, which is separate and distinct from the what I would call the balance sheet of Prince George's County or the general obligation of Prince George's County, and is financeable on a standalone basis without any drag on the county's credit rating or debt capacity. The shortcoming of what I suggested is providing debt as a general obligation off of the issuing jurisdiction is that it will actually impact the credit rating and the debt capacity. So I think those are two broad spectrums. On the far left, you'd have a jurisdiction issuing its own paper, its own bonds, either backed by a general obligation or off of its balance sheet with some sort of guarantee for repayment, which does affect balance sheet and potential ratings in terms of future debt capacity, or the special fee construct that can be isolated from an issuer's balance sheet.
One thing that I would add, John, this is Dave at the White House. One thing that I would add is that we are beginning to see municipalities at least reduce some of the financing costs associated with water-related financings using SRF portfolio guarantees to essentially lower the cost of taking on debt. It can be terrific collateral. New York recently released, I did a $25 million offering guaranteed by SRF obligations, and so we think that is a model that could be replicated, and would be happy to direct folks on this call who are interested in that model to folks in the country who are doing that.
Great. I'm not that familiar with that program, but it sounds like one I want to get familiar with, so thank you, David.
Yeah, thanks for both those comments. And it was, John, it was good to hear you talk about what I'll call pay for performance. We, on the last webcast with Philadelphia, in fact, heard about they're taking a pay for performance approach, and there are different options for what I'll call public-private partnerships. And in fact, the question came up about retrofits on private property. One question is, why would a P3 choose private capital versus cheaper public debt issued by the municipality? And how does a P3 fund construction? But I'm also keenly interested in the O&M aspect. You said don't lead with finance, don't have financing sort of lead the partnership. Look at the big picture. We know historically, we at EPA know historically, for stormwater, one of the biggest problems has been a lack of addressing operation and maintenance. Whether that's gray or green, green, it becomes important, but there's also opportunities for jobs. Could you talk sort of about the holistic approach that is not only about construction, but O&M perhaps, and maybe get at why a municipality would choose private over public debt, even though we heard some of the other, the fact that debt is, actually impacts a municipality's ability to raise capital in other areas.
Sure. I think to start with whether or not private or public debt is offered, that dovetails with the custom financing program that needs to meet the demands of the partnership. And with respect to those demands, if let's just say Prince George's County, for instance, in this example, is looking to stay off balance sheet and not have an impact to their future debt capacity, then you would be more interested in that custom financing package or program to have the partnership issue the debt, leveraging the special fee in an effort to meet their objectives. If keeping it off or on balance sheet isn't a main concern, then certainly public financing is cheaper. But this is where we start to get into an area where you have to be careful about letting financing drive the partnership. Because if you lock yourself in on a financing perspective to wanting to issue public debt, you may very well be increasing your development costs simultaneously. And as we have already said, that might be okay, but there's no amount of savings in financing that can make up for that increase in costs. So it's something that has to be evaluated through the course of the partnership development, but by no means, should you lock yourself into a financing structure before the partnership has been formed and the degree to which cost savings can be achieved can be identified. So that's the first answer to one of your questions, and I think the second question was with respect to long-term maintenance and pay for performance. And I think that might be an excellent question for Tony, and I can put my 2 cents into it. And my 2 cents are that pay for performance has proven to be a very effective alignment of interests in partnership creation. In my mind, because the partnerships that I've worked on who have pay for performance long-term aligned interests within the public-private partnership have been some of the most effective. I'm seeing them unfold 15, 20 years after they've been created, forming the exact and addressing and filling the needs and preferences of the partnership from its initiation in terms of strong management and maintenance of the facilities that have been built through the partnership. So if you focus on just a short-term construction project without any focus on long-term management within that partnership, you're likely to run afoul of long-term successful programs, and that's my opinion. But of course, I'm sure others might have challenging views. But my experience has been exactly that. That in order to build, this is a long-term project. It's got construction and management. To link them both together and to incentivize pay for performance brings investors, issuers, and developers in alignment of interest in terms of a successful program for everyone's return, including the developers. So there's a lot more to be said about that. There are plenty of examples in some of the partnerships we've worked in where things have gone wrong, and under the partnership framework, they've been corrected because it was the right partnership framework. So I think Tony could probably address some of those better than I can, but I think it's worth mentioning.
Well, great. In fact, you provided a really nice segue to Tony. So with that, John, I'll thank you. There are more questions coming in. We'll try to get to them after Tony and later in the panel. But I would like to now turn it over to Tony Friedman.
Thanks, Dominique. I've got to say that Dominique's passion and her enthusiasm and her knowledge here are so powerful that sometimes I feel that she keeps raising the curtain on this production before the cast really has all of its costumes on. So
okay, I'm not paying anybody to say these things, everyone. Thank you, Tony.
and we are in the middle of making Prince George's County transaction happen, and by talking about what we're looking at, I hope to give a closer look at some of the issues that David and John raised. We start with the idea of a P3. Now, a P3 is more of a name than it is a specific structure. You can argue that we've been doing P3s in housing for more than 50 years, and on and on. Anywhere government runs into the private sector, you have a public-private partnership. But there are elements to a public-private partnership that are pretty much generally seen across the board. Having a public-private partnership brings benefits in contracting and financing. You can avoid detailed government contracting rules and contract administration. It brings advantages in financing. Both John and David talked about alternative ways of financing these projects, and the flexibility in financing is particularly important because each local jurisdiction may want to do things differently. One jurisdiction may want to pledge its revenues. One jurisdiction may have a particular pledged fee fund. Another jurisdiction may indeed want to draw on the state revolving fund. One way or another, each jurisdiction is likely to take a different approach to financing, and John's critical point is that the deal has to drive the structure. The structure doesn't drive the deal. In the same way, the private sector brings efficiencies and expertise and core capacities to a transaction that are not necessarily core capacities for the local government. So the private sector can build quickly, can experiment more easily, and can try new methods, which is particularly important in this area, in a way that's much more flexible and responsive than government, which can be tied up in rules or old procedures for doing things. So the private sector can bring efficiency and flexibility. That's why when we make estimates of doing things 30, 40, 50% more cheaply, it's not just a promise of magic. It's experience and expertise in bringing capacities to government that aren't necessarily core governmental capacities. The arrangements have to, and you've heard this repeated constantly, align the interests of the public and the private sector. The incentives have to be there for both parties to win in a transaction. If the private partner does its job properly, it's compensated appropriately, and the public partner benefits. So these are the generally talked about advantages of public-private partnerships, and in fact, they are those the advantages. But when you look at stormwater, it's important to understand that when we talk about public-private partnerships in the stormwater area, we're really talking about what is a fairly unique set of challenges that are different from the activities that are often carried out by public-private partnerships. David mentioned the usage of transportation in infrastructure grants. Well, the truth is that public-private partnerships in the past 10 to 20 years have very often focused on large infrastructure, large transportation, or large energy projects. And there are groups of people, both on the finance side and the legal side, who are used to doing large energy, transportation, or infrastructure projects. The stormwater projects are not going to be like that. We are talking, and Dominic wonderfully said, we're looking at hundreds, perhaps thousands of different projects in each of these areas. So there isn't a big project. There isn't a big project from which the developer can put a certain amount of money at risk, make a great deal of money, and simply run. Simply depart and leave it to somebody else to maintain. Instead, the real art in stormwater is to build a project that is easy to be maintained and can be maintained for the long term, and will operate at continued efficiency for its full life. Moreover, we're not talking about a single project that's going to cost $100 million. We're perhaps talking about 200 projects that are going to cost $500,000. And those are very different to design and implement and maintain. Moreover, of course, power plants produce revenues. You can put a toll on a highway. Sewage treatment plants can charge fees to localities for cleaning their water. The stormwater reduction exercises will not normally produce revenues. They can, and one of the features of the Prince George's transaction, we hope, will be to create revenue-producing methods. But by and large, putting in stormwater infrastructure means expending capital and not producing revenues. As a result, the dialogue between, or really among David and John and Dominique, really led to the point that one way or another the government has to provide a reliable revenue stream here. And whether that revenue stream is in the form of some periodic appropriation pledge backed by the so-called moral obligation of the county, or whether it's a direct revenue bond, or whether it's some intermediate between a general obligation, moral obligation, and direct revenue bond. Dominic, I didn't notice a large category of bond lawyers among the people that you polled, so I'm going to assume that we don't have a large group. But one way or another, the public credit has to be put at risk here, because the assets that we are producing, by and large, by themselves, do not generate revenues. Another difference between the traditional P3 mode, or what people think of as the traditional P3 mode, and what we're doing in stormwater, is we don't necessarily know all the projects going in. In fact, we don't necessarily know all the methodologies, all the BMPs going in. What we know is that we have to treat, in the case of Prince George's County, 2,000 acres of stormwater runoff. And one way or another, we have to design and plan and implement hundreds of different projects that will accomplish that goal. What that means is, up front, we can't put a price on things. We can create a pricing methodology. We can create a way to plan and implement those plans, and we can agree with our public partner at what point we are willing to predict pricing, but there's no way that we can price a job going in. As a result, local jurisdictions are wise to pursue partners for stormwater, not through an RFP method where they say, tell me what you're going to build and tell me what it's going to cost, but rather through an RFQ methodology, which is, tell me what you've done, tell me how you approach what we want to do, how you're going to implement it in our county or our city. So it's essential to realize that we don't know when we go in what we're going to do. That also means, of course, that the essence to that agreement, that project agreement or partnership agreement between the private and public entities, is one plan development. The private party and the public party. In Prince George's County, we've got a great partner that really knows a great deal about stormwater and will throw out suggestions and recommendations to us all the time. What about this? What about that? So we have an interactive process with our partner in developing and identifying projects that we're going to implement. And second, as we know those projects better, we begin to price. And what that means is that we can begin to move the pricing risk from the public partner, where it's got to be up front, to the private partner. By the way, there's a great tendency, great temptation to put all of the pricing risk on the private partner. And I will tell you that the private partner will take that pricing risk, and the public partner will pay for the private partner taking it. So when the private partner says, I could take this risk, but it will cost you a lot more than if we do this together with properly aligned interests, the private partner is telling you accurately. Another difference in stormwater is that it is tricky to measure the success of a facility, the effectiveness of a facility. It's not as if you can sit there and measure the quality of the water that's coming out of a pipe. It's not that you can sit there and say, how many kilowatts does this plant produce, or how many cars can go on this road. What we're talking about is building facilities that are expected to operate in a certain fashion if they are properly constructed. So the notion of success testing is its own challenge. And as we get a clearer view of success testing, we work to integrate that into the incentive fee structure. The good side of that, of course, is that because we're working in a novel area, there's room for invention. There's room to develop new products, new methodologies, and the ability perhaps to sell them or use them in other contexts. Again, the opportunity of producing revenue for this joint venture exercise. As has been mentioned several times on the call, the nature of the work that's done in stormwater lends itself to local business development, minority business enterprise, and small businesses. So a paramount objective for Prince George's County is to take advantage of this inherent opportunity in stormwater control. There is a cost to that, of course, which means that the programs have to integrate training. They have to integrate working and finding potential sources of labor and education within the community. We know they're there, and we're going to reach out and do it, but it means that this is a real program cost. So it's a real program benefit and a real cost. And then finally, the ultimate success in this program, as John pretty much finished up with, is determined not by the fact that you built something, but that you've got it up and running for the long term. So that one of the things that's constantly discussed with our partner in the Prince George's County transaction is how do we build into the plan for a particular facility something that can be maintained at efficient cost for the long term, something that will work for the long term, and how do we make sure that the money is there to operate and maintain it for the long term. For more common construction facilities, the big money is up front, and maintenance takes care of itself. At least we pretend that maintenance takes care of itself. For these facilities, maintenance has to be built in. You can't finance maintenance with capital funds. You need that ongoing revenue source. But you nonetheless have to build in appropriate provision for O&M in your program design. So what that means is that ultimately both the locality and the private partner have to be in this business for the long term. This isn't a developer that makes $20 million up front, shakes hands, and leaves. This isn't a county that turns it over to a private party and say, you run it. This is a long-term partnership relationship that operates in one way or another by two parties working together with aligned interests. That's the story, Dominique.
And you're going to stick to it?
I'm going to stick to it.
That was very informative. I don't know about everybody else, but I was taking a lot of notes. And there are questions coming up, lots of good points that are coming through from the audience that I want to really try to get to. But, Tony, I want to thank you. In the interest of time, however, I really want everybody to hear from Jason. We're going to move to Jason's presentation. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Once again, I'm Jason Washington. I'm at City First Enterprises, and I am Senior Vice President, and I'm running our Community Wealth Building Initiative, which is really a brainchild of philanthropy in the region to think about ways, as David said earlier, to really create an opportunity for those that are chronically underemployed and unemployed to enter the market and really as an alternative to your regular workforce development structure, so to speak. We just a little bit about City First Enterprises. We are basically a consultant to local funders to really lead the planning of structuring what this would look like. We are a community development financial institution. We've been in D.C. for over 20 years, and our big focus is to really channel capital and finance services to low to moderate income communities in the region. We have a community development bank, New Market Tax Credit division. We also have City First Homes, and so our whole enterprise has been around pushing capital, pushing opportunity into the most underserved communities in this region. And so in the interest of time, I really wanted to point out really that, community wealth building was started, and we really thought that this was time for it in this region to really deal with the income inequality that exists in the country today, and that over the last 20 plus years, that the income gains in household incomes have been at the top 2%, and really trying to be creative around how to solve that problem. And so what we mean by wealth building strategy is simply improving the ability of individuals in a community to increase their asset ownership, to anchor jobs in the local community, to expand the job development opportunities in those communities, and to ensure local economic stability. And so that is what we mean by building wealth, and specifically community wealth building is really an idea inspired by Evergreen Cooperative out of Cleveland and Madrigal, Spain, around launching green employee-owned businesses that will provide wealth-building jobs in low-income communities, as well as connecting with local anchor institutions. So we're talking about your hospitals, your universities, local governments, to really secure long-term contracts and sustainability but to also help to generate and reinvest funds back into the local communities that surround these institutions. Part of our goal and plan of creating and thinking about employee-owned businesses to really ensure that these were businesses that were viable, that these were credible for-profit businesses that will be interacting with local government, that will be interacting with anchor institutions. We felt the need to be very, very focused and rigorous on the front end, and so we retained the services of Next Street, which is a merchant bank out of New York, to assist us with business analysis, looking at all of the possible business lines in this region that through interviews, etc., people thought would be great opportunities for these type of businesses, but we really looked at sustainable profitability, short payback period, should there be any capital investments into the companies, significant job creation, low barrier to workforce entry, anchor engagement, improved living standards, and community wealth creating. And really those tie into, and I've heard other, I think Tony mentioned it right before me, is that, a big part of this is also, making sure that we create the businesses that we can build in sufficient upstart training, but continual training going through. And through that business analysis, we identified 2 business lines that we are moving forward with creating and launching here in the D.C. area. One being a green stormwater management business that we will locate in Prince George's County with the hopes that we will be able to work with and partner with the community-based public-private partnership that's being created there. Another one will be a industrial greenhouse that we're still trying to site, but that will have the same tenants. We are incredibly excited about the opportunity of moving into stormwater management. This company at the beginning will be focused on the maintenance and inspection portion of green stormwater management and the retrofits that go on. Our structure will be in such a way to where these operating companies will be for-profit companies, but they will be supported by a nonprofit parent where we will provide the back office support, the continual training, workforce development, wraparound services that we believe our population will need to clear out impediments that will keep them focused on producing at the job, and also keep the companies productive. And through that support network, we believe we will be able to maximize the impact that these initial companies will have in the community, as well as being able to deliver on the contracts. And really the project impact is that the holding company or the parent co or the nonprofit in this case really is focused on anchor engagement. We want to be seen as a convener. We want to build up the thought that any new project that's coming out, any big innovative tool that's coming down through local government, that this is an opportunity for an employee-owned business to help plug into what's going to be, procured, services that will be provided, goods that will need to be produced, because we really believe that, that is how you build wealth, that is how you have a job story, that is how you create ladders of opportunities for individuals who are, chronically unemployed, underemployed, to really help, we believe, increase the impact that these type of projects can have on the communities at large and in specific high-need communities. One other real big benefit that we see of, with community wealth building and the impact that it can have specifically in Prince George's County is what we consider two-generation impact, is the ability for children to see their parents really owning and having a stake in their career and in their jobs, and and that trickle down to better schools, that trickles down to lower crime, and that we believe really provides an incentive to the turning of communities and neighborhoods, and that there is a ownership that exists, that these are our companies, these are our businesses, and that we are equipped to move forward and to really start to live out the American dream, and to have an opportunity to grow assets and to be able to transfer those down families, down family lines. And so that is what we are excited about. We know that there's a lot of work for us still to do, but we believe that this model is definitely, another arrow in the quiver for local governments and regions to think about in terms of how to address the jobs crisis that exists in this country. I want to leave it there to respect time and have it open for questions, but appreciate the time.
Jason, thanks. That was actually a great overview of delineating what the mechanics are when we talk about growing local wealth, and the importance of local jobs, and the importance of essentially addressing the self-esteem and pride of communities who ultimately drive everything that's happening on the ground. And in that regard, while we have had the speakers refer to Prince George's County, I really want to acknowledge that we know there are many communities out there who are taking risks, who are trying to kind of come at some of these moving parts, because there are many moving parts. And we want to hear from you. We're getting lots of questions in, and we won't have time to address any of them, but I'm going to start shooting some out to all of you, and anyone can feel free to respond. One question, and this may fit with enterprise zones and maybe some of the HUD housing background here, but how would these types of P3 models fit with the use of special service districts established to address, for example, in this case, stormwater management? There's a reference to the importance of the fee revenue stream, but would anybody care to address that question?
Dominic, it's Tony. The truth is that stormwater needs anything that the federal government is calling money this year. And one of the things that we're looking at with Prince George's County are a variety of grant resources and income resources, and the art is going to be figuring how most effectively to pursue those resources and integrate them into the planning. So anything that fits, you have to be careful of square peg round hole questions, but you do really have to go into it with the expectation that the public and the private partner together are going to be looking at every conceivable revenue source.
Okay, does anybody else want to comment? Well, there's actually another question. How is a P3 different, if at all, from a franchise waste hauler? I know we've talked about P3s that have historically been used for solid waste, for example, perhaps in regional approaches. One thing I just would like to comment on in terms of that question is, we've heard the speakers all acknowledge, is that we're really looking at a different approach to stormwater in this case. It's not just about using a P3, but it's also P3 approaches for stormwater that incorporate the use of green infrastructure, which also allows for this diversity of business growth and job growth, which we really need across the country. But I'm going to now open it up to the speakers.
I guess one thing, this is Dave, one thing that I would say as we get feedback across the country from localities about green infrastructure and the barriers to implementing it, some say that the evidence base could be stronger. One thing that P3s do is they align the incentives such that only if the installation is working, or if the series of installations are working, does the private partner get paid. That forces the building of an evidence base as an unintentional and sort of happy corollary or sort of side outcome, because as long as there's specific infrastructure solutions will be deployed, and as long as they're working, the public-private partner is getting paid, we will develop evidence about what's not working and what is, and then that information can be shared around the country. So this, and it can be shared around the country to reduce the perceived risk of green stormwater infrastructure generally, while enabling those who enter the P3s not to take on too much risk by sharing that risk with a private partner. So I think that this is meaningful not just in a micro sense for individual communities, but also for helping a whole practice area of stormwater develop and understand what's best, what works best, and what doesn't.
I would answer that somewhat differently, and I would say that it's as different from hiring a waste hauler as you want it to be. And that is, if the locality wants to do the planning and financing by itself and simply engage private parties on a contract to do it, it can do it. If it wants to involve the private partner in the planning, in the financing, if it wants to do things outside of the normal contracting rules, if it wants to do things where it feels it doesn't have a particular expertise in the area, if it wants to do things where it gets the financing off the books, then the P3 starts to look different. But really the P3 has to meet the local government's objectives and its considerations.
Great, and we're getting comments appreciating the different perspectives that have been arrayed. A question is green infrastructure. Okay, these questions keep jumping away from me, so I'm going to have to kind of go to this. There's a question about green infrastructure in parks. I think this is from LA. Are there any examples of green infrastructure being applied to parks? And it's something that would be very useful. I am aware that in Philadelphia that's a pivotal component. I think we've also heard in other areas that parks are pivotal components, but I don't know if anybody, Dave or anybody, wants to comment on that. The other question, and I will say that this one's taken me a little bit by surprise. I'm not as familiar, so I'm going to ask it. Talk about the tension or synergy between P3s for green infrastructure and land use planning and comprehensive plans. I will start with the fact that we're talking about an approach that is responding to a requirement, which is about water quality and local water quality. Are regulatory requirements addressed in land use planning? I do think they can be green infrastructure allows some syncing up of the two, but does anybody else on the panel want to take a gander at that question?
Well, sure. In stormwater, we're most often talking about retrofit, so that we're dealing with structures and conditions that already exist, and talking about solving runoff problems that we've got. Going forward, integrating planning is critical. In fact, what I'm thinking is that one of the key, and yet again, an area in which P3 has particular promise is that the public partner and the private partner have to work together on things like permitting and planning and all aspects of the planning process, working with local utilities, getting authority to do things. So in a broader sense, yes, the more that the local government can do to integrate its planning processes with its various objectives, the more efficient things will operate. But the sort of quick technical answer is, if you do in retrofit, you're sort of undoing what's been done rather than looking ahead.
And in fact, Tony, that's a great response. We're getting some responses that are saying it's actually a boost and enables them to do better retrofit if there is that integration of planning. And in fact, along those lines, GI and parks, where parks have been planned as part of that urban landscape, it's happening in Washington State. It's happening in New York City. Parks has green infrastructure incorporated. Portland has a stormwater park in the Pearl District. Hey, this sounds like a future webcast. And in the interest of time, I know we're running over. I'm going to say that we will be posting these and other great questions that are coming in. I'm also going to sort of say on behalf of Nancy Stoner, we want to hear the kinds of issues and barriers, those of you that are trying to do this, as well as anybody out there here that has examples, perhaps smaller examples, of how you've used a P3 partnering approach to addressing green infrastructure and our local jobs and local wealth. We want to use this venue to identify that and, in fact, share it with our speakers who are very interested in moving this around the country. So please let us know what's on your mind, where your challenges are, and that's my quick segue while thanking our speakers today. And I do want to turn it over for a minute to Claudio. So, Claudio, I want to save a little bit of time for Wes, who has been a great partner in this, in saying that our next webcast, keep an eye out. We want to actually try to do more interaction with representatives of communities out there that are trying to figure this out and also who have good examples. We're working with American Rivers and others to set up a panel of guest speakers, but we're also going to have sort of behind the yellow curtain a number of experts, interdisciplinary, around the country who are going to be available to answer your questions. So we really want our next webcast to be about you. So please let us know. Send your ideas, your questions, your challenges, your concerns, your great accomplishments into Amber. You see her email there. We want to start to facilitate a little more support to you and share that with your regions and other partners out there that are there to help you. And with that, I'm going to turn it over quickly to Claudio.
Hello, everybody, and thank you again for the opportunity, Dominique. And it's been an amazing panel to hear about the level to which P3s are going, and understanding, too, what a great opportunity it will be for our municipalities to be able to expand their ability to finance projects and to work with others. The partnership levels that we're looking at and what we think our members are interested in are, and know they are interested in, are just great. There are opportunities that exist to focus on stormwater financing and to diversify the way in which projects are paid for, I think, are really tremendous effort that we need to continue to work together. WAF is definitely a partner in this effort, will continue to be. Our members are very supportive of that, and we look forward to other opportunities to continue to work with EPA and other partners. We think that the Chesapeake work that we've done together on G3 is a tremendous start. Competitions for LID or LID competitions and trying to incentivize others to have those kinds of competitions are the kinds of things we're looking for. We're looking for opportunities as well to bring the energy and water nexus to be part of this thinking. We already think, too, that there are opportunities as we resolve some issues with integrated planning and get some of the permitting issues worked out. In the way that connects is because of the affordability side of integrated planning. There is an opportunity there as well to talk about how alternative funding would come into the picture. So it provides an opportunity and a tool for us to have a conversation about affordability that makes more sense. So as we leverage these resources, as we allocate risk and sharing the risk, and as the municipalities find other ways to do so, I think we need to continue to support that. And WEF is definitely determined to do so and to continue to increase opportunities and add opportunities to that. So we look forward, Dominique, to working with you, to continue to working with you, to continue to working with other communities as well, and supporting this effort.
Thank you, Claudio. And with that, I really want to thank our guest speakers, Nancy Stoner, David Wilkinson. Again, Dave, I think you're ready to teach the course. We're really going to make sure we capture everybody's points. There was a lot of information shared today, along with that of John Germain, Tony Friedman, and Jason. We're real interested to see how we can help to grow out this local wealth building initiative. I think it's very critical to a sustainable community. For those participants on the phone, thank you for giving us your time. We really see collectively growing this community of practice, strength for our community, strength for the country, global competitiveness. The creativity here is important, and we're looking for ways to support that. So we'll encourage you to get in your comments to Amber. Some are already coming in. And thank you again for joining us for today's Faster, Cheaper, Greener webcast.
Thank you.